There we go. What's up, everybody? Today I want to talk about my recent backpacking trip to the Grand Canyon. So this was my first time ever backpacking in my life. It was very tiring. It was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, but I'm very glad that I did it. The background on it is that my sister-in-law lives in Arizona, and she and her husband have backpacked the Grand Canyon before. They've been trying to get permits to camp at the bottom of the Grand Canyon for over 3 years. They managed to do it and invited my wife and myself to go. It was a really fun trip, but yeah, so tiring. I have a lot of fun shots and things to share in this video, so let's get into it. So yeah, this was my first time ever backpacking, and I was starting from zero, and thankfully my sister-in-law has lots of experience backpacking before, so she helped us out with like gear, backpack, poles, all sorts of stuff that we needed, and then stuff that I needed to pack. So I had a pretty hefty bag on my back. I think it was almost like 50 or 60 pounds. It was very heavy. And I also didn't make it easy on myself because as someone who likes to take a lot of photos, I wanted to bring some photography gear. I brought my Fuji X-T3 and 16-55 zoom lens, which is kind of a beefy kit, but I wanted something super durable because again, we're hiking. I wanted something that was weather resistant, and the X-T3 and that lens are also like dust resistant, and that's very important when you're on the trail at the Grand Canyon. I also have it rigged out for when I go hiking even up here in Seattle with a Peak Design clip, so I can just put it on my backpack strap and it just sits there. And that's actually like one of the easiest things that I found through all my hiking. I also wanted to bring it because my sister-in-law and her husband wanted to do some portraits at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, which I'll get into later, but I wanted to have really good quality lens for that as well. Of course, I brought film, and I used my trusty Olympus Mu point and shoot. And again, it's so small and easy. Everything adds up when you're backpacking in terms of weight, and I really learned that on this trip, but it was definitely worth it. So what I did is I attached a carabiner to the wrist strap, and I just put it on the other backpack strap opposite of my Fuji so that I could have both ready to take pictures whenever, and it actually worked out really well. And then in terms of what film I brought, I'm wearing this Kodak hat for a reason. I shot all Kodak film. The warm tones and just kind of the look of Kodak films is, I think, matched well with the desert, and that ended up being the right choice. I'm not a backpacking expert. I am not going to give you any gear advice or anything like that, so that's as much as the gear talk that I'll get into. So for this backpacking trip, we were camping 2 nights at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. The first night was at Phantom Ranch, and the second one was at Havasu Gardens. Day 1, the hike was down to Phantom Ranch, which is at the very bottom of the Grand Canyon by the Colorado River, and it's just all downhill straight from the top. So this was probably the hardest day of hiking that we had over these 3 days. It didn't help that it was hotter than usual. This was back at the end of October, and it's supposed to cool down a little bit down in Arizona, but we started hiking early in the morning, probably right, I think it was at like 8 a.m., and it was already nearing 60 degrees. As you descend down, it gets warmer and warmer, so the top was 60 degrees, but at the bottom was over 90 degrees at its peak. It's gonna be a tough one. The hike downhill was 7.5 miles and about definitely over 4,000 feet of elevation gain. So definitely a tough way to start off my first backpacking hike. So yeah, the hike was obviously tiring, as I keep saying, but the views were insane. Just the rocks, the desert, the cacti, and the open skies. It was everything I could have hoped for, honestly. And I'm very happy with a lot of the shots that I got when slowed down and taking the scenery and take some shots. A lot of times when we were taking breaks too to fuel up or drink some water or just rest our feet and get the pack off of our backs for a second. So it was a good time. But again, I was so slow because it was very tiring. So as we were going down, we saw these pack mules, which are famous there. They've been going up and down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon to Phantom Ranch since the late 1800s, which is crazy. We encountered them, but at kind of an awkward area where the light was really bad, it was really tight, and I also just wasn't prepared for them, so I wasn't able to get any good shots that I was happy with, but I did see them again the next day, and I'll show you those shots I got later. So after a long, slow for me hike to the bottom, we finally made it and were rewarded with probably the best lemonade I've ever had in my life. It was so hot and I was so tired, and it just hit really nicely. This was down at Phantom Ranch, and a little bit of backstory here is that my sister-in-law and her husband actually met down at Phantom Ranch when they were hiking. To commemorate this, my sister-in-law actually hiked down with her wedding dress. They both got married earlier that year, and so they wanted to do a little photo shoot down at the bottom. It was kind of a special moment, hence why I brought all this photo gear. So we went out by the river, and we were definitely fighting the light. The sun was setting pretty fast, and the cliffs had already blocked a lot of that sunlight, so it was tricky light, but we were able to get a bunch of shots off, and I'm pretty happy with how they turned out, all things considering how tired I was, and we made it work. So for the film I was using these portraits alongside my X-T3, I was shooting on Kodak Ultramax, which is one of my go-tos, and it definitely was helpful to have that 400 ISO feed with the lower light. After a terrible night's sleep, I can't sleep well when I'm camping. Even though I was really tired, I'm just uncomfortable, and just doesn't work out well for me. We reached day 2, which was another early start. We made our ascent from the bottom of the Grand Canyon at Phantom Ranch to Havasupai Gardens. What was cool about this hike was, one, it was a little bit easier for me because I was getting more used to the pack, and going uphill, it's a lot easier for me. Weirdly. As we were leaving Phantom Ranch, those pack mules that I had mentioned before actually were just arriving. We were in such a spot where it was backlit. I could actually see them on this bridge that goes over the river. And so we stayed there positioned. I got my camera out. I was ready. And so I got these shots, which I'm super excited about. I basically was just in burst mode, just trying to get as many shots as I could. With the dust and the backlit light, it looks pretty epic. I like them both in black and white and color. I really can't choose, but super stoked on these. So for day 2, in terms of film that I was shooting, I still had my roll of Ultramax loaded from the night before when we did portraits, so I wanted to finish that one off as we were making our ascent. I also knew this long stretch of the hike was going to be this flat part in just like pure sunlight, harsh light in the afternoon. It's going to be hot. There's no cover from the cliffs or anything, so I ended up loading Ektar 100 as the film I used at that portion. 1, because of the low ISO speed, and 2, because I really like the orange-red hues from it, and it matched perfectly with the desert. I really like that film, and I know those are the tones in the environment, especially for landscapes, and I avoid using it on anyone because the skin tones just look terrible. But yeah, Ektar 100, I'm very happy that I shot this film, and I love the results that came out of it. So we finally made it to camp. It was a really nice spot, and I actually got a better night's sleep, so I was very happy about that. But we still have one more day of hiking, and that hike is just a straight up ascent back to the top of the Grand Canyon. So here we are at day 3, making our return hike up. It's about a 5-mile hike, but again, it's just going back up. I was very tired, probably smelled really bad. The film that I loaded up for this day was Color Plus again, just because of the light conditions were going to be similar to the first day. Very happy that I did that because I loved how the shots came out. Right at the beginning, there was a tree that kind of lined up with the cliffs, and I was trying to frame it right. I ended up turning on the flash because I wanted to test out how it would look. This ended up being like one of my favorite photos from the entire trip. Very happy that I was able to pull it off. This was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, and I'm very glad that I did it, but I think it's going to be some time until I want to do my next backpacking trip. My sister-in-law and husband are already trying to get my wife and I to go on another one. I think we'll say yes, but again, I think I need like a year to recover from that.